Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ART Mumbai. If this is your first day here, if not, I hope you've enjoyed 3 incredible days at the Mahalakshmi Racecourse. I think these 150 years of heritage have brought us to a very different contemporary stage today, and I'm delighted that you could join us on this last day of ART Mumbai with some very, very important speaker panels. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank the Kiranadar Museum of Art. KNMA has been the main sponsor for our speaker series last year, for our first edition, and of course this year, more importantly, which has allowed us to really expand this program. And I'd also like to mention Birla Opus as a special thank you. They have actually sponsored the funding for this auditorium that we've built for these 4 days of incredible learning. So today's panel is very special. It's called Ctrl+Art+Create, and the reason it's called that is because it is centered around artificial intelligence. Everyone's been talking about AI. Hansen was here in Mumbai recently for a talk and some engagement. Everything you're doing today on your phones, on your computers, everything that's sold to you, everything you see on media, everything you see in any kind of digital format, and things that you will continue to engage with are based on artificial intelligence. AI has done what no other technology has come close to doing before, and will go on to create a world that we are simply unaware of as yet. It's not a tool, however, it's a collaborator. And what it does is it challenges the definitions of art and creativity in our world, because it's allowing that creativity and that personal thought to be extended into a non-human world. So this conversation is going to delve into the potential and the possibilities that working with AI offers, and particularly what it offers art and art practitioners. The speakers we have today will discuss questions surrounding the ethics and laws as AI stands today, and map out how meaningful resolutions can be found to ensure the protection of artistic rights and the encouragement of innovation. And the person who's going to lead this for us is our moderator, Asad Lalljee, who many of you know. He's the SVP of the SR Group. Excuse me, too many days of yelling. He's also the CEO of Avid Learning, and which is an arts and culture public programming platform. He is, very importantly, the curator of the Royal Opera House in Mumbai, which has brought us decades of incredible performance. He brings years of advertising and publishing and marketing and business development experience, because he used to be one of the madmen on New York's Madison Avenue in the advertising world. In 2018, Asad was inducted into the FICCI Art and Culture Committee. In 2022, he was taken on board the executive committee at Kala, with whom Avid shares a decade-long partnership. And he's also been on the advisory board, where I dragged him in, kicking and screaming, but we were delighted to have him because he's been an incredible resource for the Mumbai Urban Art Festival that is run by the START Foundation. And with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Asad, to introduce the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mina, Zoya, Dinesh, and the whole Saffron Art team and Art Mumbai team for having me back for the second time at the second edition of the Art Mumbai. I think it's an incredible fair. Congratulations to the team, and it is something that the whole city is talking about, and we eagerly look forward to the third edition. I hope you'll have me back then. You know, when Prime Minister, I'm just going to do a few opening remarks before calling on my panel. When PM Modi inaugurated the 46th session of the World Heritage Committee in New Delhi in July, he expressed confidence that the Indian cultural and creative industry will become a big factor in global growth. The Creative Economy Outlook Report of 2024 by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development underscores the pivotal role the creative industry plays in trade and economic growth. And according to it, annual revenues of $2 trillion accounts for 50 million jobs worldwide. The creative services exports surged to 1.4 trillion in 2022. Developing countries have significantly increased their share from 10% in 2010 to 20% in 2022. Another Goldman Sachs report of 23 estimates the global creative economy is set to double to 480 billion by 2027. As all of you know, India is the most populous nation in the world with close to 1.5 billion people. It's a young nation. 24% are under the age of 14, employs 8.3% of the population. It's the 7th largest exporter of creative goods and the 3rd largest among developing countries. With 100 million content creators in the world, India is now the content capital of the world. As Minal already mentioned, but the last 2 weeks was a demonstration of how important India has become to the world of technology, especially AI. NVIDIA's co-founder and CEO, Jensen Huang. We had the CEO of Microsoft AI, Mustafa Suleyman, the chief AI scientist of Meta, Ian LeCun, all in different parts of India in the parts of 2 weeks. AI has become one of the most transformative and disruptive forces in the arts, and AI is undeniably transforming the essence of creativity. On one hand, it's catalyzing innovation and artistic expression by providing unprecedented tools and platforms that push boundaries to create what was not possible before. Whether it's the visual arts, composing music, enhancing storytelling, AI is on the forefront of this creative revolution, opening new avenues. Beyond the individual creators, AI is impacting the broader creative economy in unprecedented ways. It presents remarkable opportunities for growth, expansion, driving new business and efficiencies. It has opened doors, but it also proposes significant ethical and legal challenges to artists, creators, and policymakers who are just beginning to grapple with the situation. The potential risk proposed by AI is being discussed by policymakers all over. As we dive deep into the implications of AI and on the creative economy, it is imperative to recognize the individuals who are the forefront of these transformations. This brings me to the task at hand. I'm delighted to invite my esteemed and very distinguished panelists on board. Serial tech founder and CEO of Time Zero Capital, Dinesh Moorjani. I'll take this one. This one in the next one. Partner, artificial intelligence, corporate technology, media and telecom, Trilegal, Nikhil Narendran. A little louder, guys. Come on. Indian sci-fi creator, screenwriter, and VP of Development, Bang Bang Media Corp, Prateek Arora. With these thoughts and innovation on the top of your mind, let us turn to this distinguished panel to hear their perception on collaboration, ethics, and the future of AI and art. Just 1 second, guys. Wow, what a pleasure. I sound different on this mic. But anyway, sorry, I don't have their detailed bios with me. I thought that was going to be announced. But our conversation is just going to tell you what a stellar panel. In fact, I normally never get nervous, but reading their bios, that happened to me this morning. So I'm going to start with Dinesh, since he's technically our guest because he's the visitor, not living in India. Dinesh, I was talking to you earlier. Data from the Traxton indicates a sharp dip of funding in AI startups in 2023. It was down by 80% from 554 million to 113 million. But on the other hand, in India, which you may or may not be that familiar with, but the AI investment shows a promising trajectory, with forecasts estimating that it will reach 17 billion by 2047. And they say private investments are around 1.4 billion already. Given this dichotomy in funding trends, what implications do you see on the trajectory of AI and the creative economy, and where innovation constantly needs innovation, it needs funding and needs money?
Well, thanks again for having us. Can you hear us okay? I love talking about the intersection of financing innovation, given that that's partly what I'm focused on for my doctorate. I will tell you that the data you have on AI funding in 2023 is inconsistent with what I'm seeing globally, and in the US market in particular. The meteoric rise in financing, especially private capital and early stage innovation, all the way to growth capital, and now the public markets, to fund the evolution of AI is historic. Oftentimes venture capitalists get caught in cycles where they're following a particular trend or a hype cycle, and they overfund a particular sector. I would argue that we're still in the nascent phases of the funding of AI. The amount of capital, and if you were to look at PitchBook data, which is probably the most credible source of data for private capital markets for funding of any sector, but particularly what's happening with AI, is that there was a dramatic rise from the end of 22, particularly beginning in Q1 23 through year-to-date 24, by an order of magnitude. And it's doing two things. One, it's drawing fresh capital from LP investors and new funds, and unconventional or alternative asset classes like hedge funds, et cetera, that are investing in the private capital markets to fund AI. The second is cannibalization of funding in other sectors. So sectors that were attracting a lot of attention in 22 and 23, take the climate sector. When investors see the next shiny thing that can deliver a risk-adjusted return that's compelling, they're shifting capital over. So we're seeing a dramatic rise in funding. The implications for the AI industry as it pertains to the nexus in art is dramatic. If you look at the creative economies that are being accelerated as a result of funding in the space, it's substantial, largely because AI is becoming not only a tool, but an augmenting service provision to unlock value in a number of creative industries. Some are quite obvious. For example, tracking of data, provenance, sort of go down the list of obvious things. But some are a little bit unconventional. Just connecting collaborators in the art space. Take a company like Canva, which is simply a marketplace that's allowing creativity for the common person to be able to design and create original work. To be able to do that, the multiplier effect with AI is dramatic. And that company's been around a long time. So existing industries are getting ramped up because of the amount of funding moving in the space.
So you see a lot more coming towards the creative industries.
Yes.
Wonderful. It's good for all of us. And Nikhil, I'm going to turn to you. AI regulations are at a crossroad globally. I mean, EU is leading the path with this comprehensive framework for AI, which the AI Act, I think, was passed in March or April of this year. Where does India stand in terms of AI regulation, especially in comparison to global players? And based on the best global practices, what strategies or foundational strategies should India adopt to establish a regulatory environment that supports innovation and ethical safeguards?
That's a loaded question. First, let me just answer with where is India standing with respect to AI regulation. We are at the right place, right? When I say we are at the right place, we haven't necessarily legislated anything on artificial intelligence, and that's probably the right thing to do at this point of time. Because a couple of things to remember, at least the stage of evolution of AI at this point of time, it's nothing but a probabilistic prediction technology. It's just based on the information that's fed to an LLM. It's generating a probabilistic answer, which is based on approximation between two particular concepts or words based on a database. That's how it's operating currently. So at this point of time, the question essentially is, and what EU is probably trying to do is, they're trying to fix liability on a probabilistic output which is generated by a software, which is, to my mind, is over-regulation. And the problem with that approach is, look, you can try to do this because, they have an economy which, after years of, various forms of colonization and whatnot, they've got a developed economy. We don't have that. So we can't necessarily try and experiment with a regulation of a probabilistic technology. So we are at the right place. And what India probably should be doing is a couple of things. And this is, just my thought, my recommendation. Not sure what the government will do. One thing is, look, when you try and regulate a probabilistic technology like AI, you cannot operate in the current dilemma of fixing liability. Secondly, what you need to understand is that pretty much all the harms that we are scared about when it comes to AI, whether it's, artificial intelligence, having issues with respect to copyright or other intellectual property, whether it's creation of hate speech, whether it's creation of deepfake, all these crimes or all these illegalities are currently already covered by existing laws in India, right? Not just in India, pretty much across the globe, right? You open your Indian Penal Code, replaced by the new Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita or whatever, you will find that most of these offenses are already covered. We don't have state capacity to regulate this. We don't have mechanisms and ways in which to be regulated, but it's still already covered. So we don't need to create new laws for it. Right?
What is this India AI startup mission that was launched with lots of money thrown behind it?
So essentially, look, the way in which, we are a very statist economy. So whenever there is a new trend, the government would like to show that they're doing something. They typically announce a fund, right? And which means that the government will create an ecosystem saying, look, I'll allot funds to these new, venture capital of new ventures which are starting, and we'll throw the money at that level. And we started one for space, we started one for biotech. It's no different than none of the others.
An article I read, they said, the EU is proactive, the US is reactive. So what do you think India is? Opportunistic?
India is opportunistic, and we should be opportunistic, right? Because, probably, if we miss the bus, AA is one of the buses that we can really catch, so that we can really take a lot of people out of poverty, and we should not miss this bus. So I would say we are at the right place. We are being opportunistic here, and that's probably the right thing to do.
That's very comforting and optimistic to hear, but we'll go on to that. Prateek, you've introduced this Indo-futurism, envisioning India as a leader of futuristic, tech-driven narratives deeply rooted in the cultural identity. How pivotal is AI in shaping India's storytelling and cultural narrative on a global stage? And do you view AI as a means to reinforce India's unique identity, or could you potentially dilute these cultural distinctions?
I think it's going to have sweeping, like your preamble said, right? It's going to affect every industry, every facet of life. But I think given the fact where we are in our cultural evolution, and the fact that we're recently, we sort of the internet access exploding about 5 years ago, and the fact that we don't really have a very global facing entertainment industry yet, and the fact that we don't even, for the size of the country, our entertainment industry is still really growing, as is art, as is everything else, right? All of that is the opportunity. The challenge always has been that we are severely bottlenecked on access to creative tools, access to creative education, access to platforms, access to communities, and access to just people with new ideas, like famously about the film industry, right? Anyone with a new idea has not always found a home in any of our film industries, right? And when you get into the highest level, and let's say if you even made it, a lot of it as a maverick creator even 20 years ago becomes like stakeholder management, right? So that really someone who's like an individual with ideas that are a little bit out there has not really thrived in India. That's not just been the ecosystem here, right? Now for me, now it's getting there, right? Now what AI does very interestingly is enables all new forms of visual storytelling, art, content. I'm not a fan of that word. And that has just been like an explosion over the last 2 years, if anyone's been on the internet. So one of the biggest use cases that has taken the AI to the masses in India has been AI art on Instagram, right? It's just blown the thing wide open. And sure, there is a novelty to the tool, but a lot of it is just working because we haven't seen anything like it. All of these new ideas that 5 years ago had no economic model to get supported are now being able to find an audience. So for example, very specifically, I got a little bit visibility in the early days of Moorjani, etc., because I do Indian science fiction, which is not Star Wars, right? It's very rooted, it's very grounded, it's very on the street. There was no economic model to support that work, which is at one time authentic, photorealistic, photographic, but not a photograph outside of this tool, which made the cost of producing that quite low. And I read this great quote somewhere that the last 10 years or last 20 years were about a disruption in how stories and content is distributed. The next few with AI is a disruption in how it's being produced. So for India, we've got so much that there is a lot of creative energy with young people that is just waiting to explode. And so much of generations of legacy of art here that can get recontextualized, right? So a lot of the AI work that travels well is spins on Bollywood or Spider-Man in some Indian folk art style, the meme kind of stuff. So already people are working with all kinds of influences, including local Indian ones, to create something new using these tools. And that just wasn't possible like 5 years ago. So I think that's very exciting. And I think it's going to, among other things, the Indian entertainment landscape is going to be very accelerated directly as a consequence of affordable AI tools. Yeah.
And India already being one of the countries that produce the most amount of films.
Yes.
We're sitting in, they don't like the word Bollywood, but we're sitting in Bombay, which is almost the film capital of the world, except LA. He might get offended. But Dinesh, there's a company I think you founded, you're on the board of Monet Analytics that leverages AI to decode consumer emotions and behavioral patterns. And do you think AI's approach to analyzing these human emotions risks reducing individuals to mere data points? And how can we balance this data-centric view in appreciation with craftsmanship and human effort in creative work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. At the moment, a lot of what's happening with the training data that informs artificial intelligence models, foundational models, as well as the novel applications that we're seeing, are built on taking proxies from the real world. If you're talking about human emotion, for example, Monet Analytics decodes human emotion. But we have to essentially create markers on the face to understand non-visual cues, to be able to create proxies by a configurational analysis of all these different markers to say you're experiencing happiness, or you're experiencing sadness, or you're experiencing elation, or some other emotion. And it's a proxy for what's actually happening. So we're breaking down what's happening in the physical world into digital signatures. And these configurational analysis of signatures allows us to mimic what's actually happening to then provide a predictive or prescriptive analysis. That's a clinical way of describing what's happening with the use of AI to understand creative behaviors or creative industries, or at a micro level, a human being. That in no way takes away from the imagination and creativity that we bring ourselves to the collective process of creative freedoms. So we have to distinguish those two. We're not suggesting AI is providing all of the capabilities to take away original thought and the beauty of the creative process that human is bringing. What we do at Monet Analytics, and what a lot of companies are doing, are they're coming up with a way to mimic decision-making in the creative fields. And if we leave that in that lane and not try to interpret that it's suddenly going to replace what's happening with our human creativity, but rather augmenting decision-making in the business world and with technologies to do things smarter, faster, potentially more efficiently, I think that's beneficial. So there's a Chinese wall there.
I'm quite happy with Netflix telling me what I need to watch. It's too much choices. But Nikhil, I'm going to just jump back to you. And there's something we met today for the first time. We hadn't spoken before. And I was very intrigued to learn that, you've produced a movie, you've acted in documentaries, which wasn't in your official bio sent to me. But, it said that, so I'm going to talk to you about creativity right now. So it said that personality rights can sometimes restrict creativity, especially favoring established names. Zuckerberg has famously been advocating that, against preemptive regulation of emerging technologies, saying that, the ongoing debate goes whether regulated boundaries inhibit AI's creative potential. So in your view, can creativity and technological innovation flourish within a regulated framework, or do these boundaries inherently restrict AI's potential in the art world?
So, it's probably a wrong thing to say in a conference about art, but
Say it. It's okay.
let me just tell you this. If you're trying to stop artificial intelligence with IP rights, right? I need to remind you that IP rights are nothing but an artificial right. There's nothing which is inherent in an IP right. It is an invention.
Says a lawyer. Okay.
Yes, we invented this right 500 years back, right, during the time of Industrial Revolution. And at that point of time, we also created a new jobless class. There were artisans, there were chefs, there were shoemakers who got replaced by factories and machines. But you can still find fine shoemakers in the world. You can still find nice chefs in the world. You still pay a lot of money to access their creativity, their art, which is, cooking. But still, a lot of folks were disrupted. Their ways of doing life are disrupted. And to create and ensure that innovation is protected, at the same time access is also promoted, we created a new invention, and it's an artificial right called intellectual property right. So, if we try to stop artificial intelligence using artificial rights, it will actually lead to nothing but destruction of human innovation and technology, which will eventually lead to downfall of our civilization. Just like what happened in Persia when they banned printing press to print materials in Arabic, right? English took over as a global language after 1700s, right? We can move in that direction. We can try and stop artificial intelligence by enforcing artificial rights such as IP, but it will only lead to destruction. So where I stand is, we need to rethink the way in which artificial rights such as IP exist for the new world, which is a new industrial revolution powered by AI. And it's time to start thinking about it. I don't have the answers as to how it will sort of be, how these rights will be defined, how these rights will protect rights such as personality rights. I've actually got a lot of hate for the interview that I did for Scroll, saying that, look, a lot of Bollywood actors are in fact going out and protecting their personality rights and trying to make a lot of money out of it. Essentially, IP should reward innovation. It should not end up actually protecting rent seeking. And that's what's happening in a lot of places, including in the case of Mickey Mouse, right? Mm-hmm. So we should try and open up our minds and understand the fact that, look, we need to promote innovation. We need to promote the artists. We need to protect innovation, but at the same time, ensure that technology is not disrupted. How do we find that balance? We should all talk, and probably in the next 20 years, we're going to spend on that.
Hopefully sooner. But anyway, Prateek, as an artist, the debate about ethical challenges around originality with respect to other creators' work. Platforms like Moorjani, which, you've used have popularized AI art, but have also sparked this debate about IP, which is just and ethical considerations. So how do you approach, as an artist, ethical considerations in your own AI creations, particularly around originality? And what industry practices would you recommend to ensure that AI-driven creativity remains transparent and fair, given the restrictions he's mentioned?
Okay, so I think there are a few broad questions when it comes to one is, but I'll address the one you asked, which is about originality and authorship, right? That's the big question of, hey, but because we're so early and because our pop culture has done a really good job of painting a really bad idea of what technology generally is over the last 30, 40 years, the pervading theme is very dystopian. And it's very ironic that one of the enduring depictions of scary AI is Terminator 2. Meanwhile, James Cameron is super pro AI. He's on the board of stability now, right? So people have this kind of all humanized idea of this tech, which people have pointed out that it's probabilistic generation. So the big question is that, but what are you creating? It's the AI creating. And you say the same thing to a photographer, they would very rightly take offense, right? It is a new kind of tool. It is a very sophisticated tool. It's a tool that we haven't really fully understood. The latent space of training data, I don't think as a creator fully anyone's mapped out, but it is a tool. It's not sentient. It doesn't have agency. It's not alive. Despite whatever scary sci-fi movies tell us, these things are not alive. Yet, when they are, then we've got a new life form. That's a whole other conversation, right? So essentially, if I am using an AI tool, it is me, a human being, using a piece of technology to make something that hopefully resonates with another human being. That's no different from using a camera or a film camera or a pen or paint or a cave painting 50,000 years ago. It is people using the technology of the time to elicit an emotional reaction from other people. When it comes to originality, to me, it lies with the artist making it. But the other part of that debate very quickly is that the perception is that AI makes it easy. So anyone can be an artist. So what are you doing separately? Digital cameras existed for a very long time, but there are still people who take photographs, and there are photographers. people who have a deliberate practice around the art of photography. Similarly, when AI was early, just novelty, right? Just simple meme images were great. But now that everyone can access it, the threshold of interestingness and complexity has gone way up. So a simple, funny image just doesn't cut it anymore because that's easy. So it's like so ultimately the question to answer for anyone using these tools is, what is your intention behind this AI piece of work? Where are you using it? Why are you using it? Which is no different from any other art medium.
But what about provenance and using other people's work as part of the story, part of the lens?
So you mean in the training data? But
I mean, I'm talking across the art.
I mean, look, I think using other people, so I don't use other people's work, but the other big misconception is around training data, right? It's almost like this kind of bad myth that's now populated and popularized across the internet, that AI is a collage machine, for example. It's just not. It's ridiculously inaccurate in a technological sense. I don't want to get into that, but for example, the big first training run was done on a training database called Lion 5B, which is about 250 million GB. The weights that came out that power any of these AI models are about 250 GB, right? So there's no way that these images are being stored and then remixed. So that's a bad myth people have sort of promoted to help them understand. And then there are bad actors who always have this very reactionary impulse against new technology. So first, this is not a collage machine. It is a conceptual engine that understands concepts in the world and understands aesthetics, but ultimately it is a human guiding it. So there's no one's work being used. It's human. So my understanding of various aesthetic and real world concepts that I blend, and it's not even text-based prompting anymore, right? You add images, you add video. So even the input into AI, where 2 years ago it was only text, is become multimodal now. So I don't think it's unless your goal is to make a collage of other people's artwork, and that's a whole other conversation. It's not fundamentally using other people's works. I think that's a big misconception.
I think Nikhil may have a contrary point of view, but I'm going to come back to you. You want to say something about that?
Yeah, maybe if I can just frame a little bit of what you just shared. A couple of things. One is the application of AI in art. In order to understand provenance, you have to look at the tools and models used to construct the AI, the creativity process. You have to look at the training data. You have to look at the human intervention, and then all the metadata associated with timestamps, location, all that sort of stuff. If we delve into the training data, the source data used that informs within the guardrails of the black box of the AI, where is the data coming from? And what's happening is, to your point about the collage, the public, I think, is misinformed that because they're using existing LLMs like ChatGPT. If you were to ask ChatGPT a question with certain prompts, let's use a simple example. If you searched, what are the considerations, implications of AI on art? If you were to search on your phone on ChatGPT, it would give you a list of considerations, and it would give you a little description of each one, I presume. You could then, if you did your homework, go online and search, and you'll find language from articles and public domain citations that look very similar to what ChatGPT put up, which is why the public has this perception, and what you're pointing out so aptly, that it's really just taking existing copyrighted material and coalescing it, and then therefore there's really a violation of copyright and then fair use. I won't get into the legal aspects just for this, but let's delve a little deeper. That's not actually what's happening with AI-generated art. If you look at everything from 2018 in the Christie's auction, where Edmond de Bellamy sold for $432,000 onward, for all of the provocative statements about what's happening with the generation of art from AI, what you'll find is an analogy of a time-tested problem we've had in other industries that have still not been solved. Let me take the research industry. So all of our science is based on published research, right? And where is that published research generated? Oftentimes at universities and in labs. And if you were to look through that research process, you would find that someone, when they produce an article or a paper, there's some experiment or study that's being conducted, and they look at all the prior work as foundational theoretical models for their original work that they're producing and that's being peer-reviewed in journals. But what if someone has an original thought? It's never been presented before. You know what happens in the research industry, similar to what's happening in art, and we're trying to substantiate the training data? You go back and look at prior work in literature, and try to find something to anchor on, because your idea is so original that if you don't have anchor points or contextualization of what you're proposing, it won't be peer reviewed and it'll actually be rejected by the journal. So you're having to manufacture citations, even if you didn't rely on them. Again, just like AI, if it didn't rely on it, there was something novel, you're still having to go back in academic scholarly work and find something to anchor on to find an adjacency. So we haven't even solved this problem in research that's been around for centuries and centuries. We're not going to solve it in art in the near term, but there is original work, really the word original, being produced by AI that doesn't have dependencies on a collage of art that's already been produced, but it does depend on the algorithm, the boundary conditions of the algorithm, and the nature of the design of the black box and the training data that influences the originality of the art.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Nikhil, I'm sure you want to comment on that, but I'm just going to lead it with a question. When Jensen Huang was here, he said that rather than regulating technology and restricting its growth, we should regulate AI's deployment. We should regulate AI in the context of every application. The question of fair use and copyright, which we're talking about right now in AI-driven art, is pressing. It sparked so many controversies, so many, whether the New York Times or Scarlett Johansson. Now, Penguin is copyrighted, protecting the authors from AI training usage data. There was a whole music Suno fiasco that was there. So, what is the consumer's role in ethically engaging with AI-generated content? Amidst copyright debate, you see consumers playing a very important role. It's being created for them. So how can consumers navigate this landscape responsibly, especially as creators' rights are at stake?
So look, I don't know about, till some time back, we used to be a country which used to thrive on piracy, right? So I don't think, I don't know
Till
what
some time back?
Even right now, frankly, I'm sure there's a whole generation of Indians that have just grown up and probably even growing up, watching movies on torrents, right? So I'm not going to preach to the choir here, but let me answer the other part of the question, and also to sort of comment on what both Dinesh and Prateek was saying. Look, I believe, Taylor Durden in Fight Club said everything is a copy of a copy of a copy, right? And if you just look at even a master filmmaker like Tarantino has said that, look, there's nothing original in the works that he does. So which means that, look, these are some of the actors or some of the filmmakers who are bold enough to accept that, look, everything is a copy of a copy, right? Which is actually true. Every new idea, every new innovation is actually based on the foundation which is laid by our predecessors. So in that sense, there's nothing really original about many of the works that we do. For instance, we are all trained by pretty much all the comic books, all the novels that we have read on, and then we create our own content. All the artists that gone before us, we've been trained on their materials. Similarly, AI also works like that. But probably the problem is that, look, we don't have a problem with us earning profits over this. We may probably have some problems with the corporations earning a profit over this. So ultimately, it leads to a question of, is there prior material which has been created, and are these corporations deriving a lot of profit over and above that, right? So it's potentially a question of rent seeking in a different model. It's potentially a question of earning compensation for the work which is already created. And in that sense, I believe we should have some sort of a data mining exemption as a fair use for use of unstructured data. But then the question comes up, how do we compensate all the work that is being done by the artists? We don't have answers to this. Probably the way to do this is a universal basic allowance for AI, right? Because there's a lot of cost involved in training. There's a lot of cost involved in also creating and training these models, also for deployment, also in terms of the tokens that's used for it. So we need to find a balance where everybody's interest is at least to some extent protected. Maybe universal basic allowance, universal basic income, are all questions that we'll be debating to find answers for this. Right now, I don't have any answers, but I strongly believe that we cannot not have an exception for fair use for data mining exemption. And firstly, to sort of promote this, the government of India should open up its database of all the Prasar Bharati information that it holds currently, which holds beautiful information about all the broadcasts done in various vernacular languages in India, right? And it's a treasure trove of information for AI. It should just first lead the path. I don't know what the government is doing by closing it down.
Wonderful. Prateek, I was just reading this interesting article this week in the New York Times. There's this thing called the Misalignment Museum in San Francisco. I don't know whether you've been there. I've not been to San Francisco in a long time. So it's a place where you learn about AI and reflect on the possibility of technology through thought-provoking art pieces and events. So basically, they take the piss out of AI and, they make fun. And there's stand-up comedy, there's music produced. I think it's so cool in a way to decode some of the fallacies around what is there, but also incentivize and encourage creative production. But coming back to it, there's an ongoing critique about AI in art, always emphasizing of quantity versus quality, and its loss of losing the human touch. So how do you define the quality of AI generated art? Particularly, AI is opening this mass production and accessibility. Does democratization impact the traditional notion of quality in works produced through AI?
I think two things. If there was a traditional notion of quality that I believed in, that died with the internet a long time ago, right? Volume has not been a measure of quality. So one of the most influential pop artists of this generation is a guy called People. You know why he's so influential?
Because how much he went for?
His legacy is that he did something called People every day. Yep. Literally one piece of really complex 3D art every day for 1,000 days. And that when the NFT thing was at its peak, that was, I think, the highest selling NFT art book of all time, like some $70 million, right? There are ways to build practice around volumes, right? You totally can do that, right? Photographers have done extensive year-long documentations with thousands of prints. So, but that said, I don't think limiting quality and scarcity, which is ironic saying that at an art festival, because a lot of this world works with limitation of like quantity and scarcity, right? But also we live in the age of algorithmic slop. It's not that AI images are in abundance. Everything is in abundance. The great rug pull of the newsfeed is that everyone feels that I am one video away from becoming viral and becoming the next superstar, right? That has created an oversupply of all kinds of content, reel, music. Spotify, if you speak to musicians, I've spoken to musician friends, they're really frustrated at the volume of music every day on Spotify. So like anything else, this will become a part of the thing, and it's about the person. You have to feel responsible as a creator that it's a noisy world. Do I want to add to the noise, or do I want to cut through the noise and say something that's I know has relevance? It's nothing to do beyond a point with the technology itself, because people are using that technology like everything else, essentially.
I had a question for you about nano creators, and there are so many people creating specific content, and they're finding it so difficult to actually get any access because the algorithms favor, especially with YouTube and all, favor the established. So how do they create a space for themselves and actually succeed?
Right. So here's the thing, right? Again, so now we've been sort of talking about the challenges, but when you massively reduce the cost of producing a certain kind of content, you incentivize a lot of people who would not fit the model of a creator or an artist in the current paradigm to be able to do that. We are living in the example. Once upon a time, to do visual storytelling in India meant that you had to move to one of the cities that had a film industry, or maybe a little bit if you're doing news in Delhi, right? With YouTube, your studio is your Mumbai. You don't have to move to Mumbai. People are moving to Mumbai or spending time here once they've made it big. So every city with an internet connection is potentially an entertainment city, right? Now you take that but that system has gotten ossified. There are the big creators. They keep launching new channels. They keep collaborating. So attention is hard to come by. Now with AI, it opens up a whole new paradigm where people can do a new kind of content. And already you are seeing this wave of AI creators who are getting attention, rivaling your big YouTubers. For example, I know of someone who's doing these short AI video reels. They're very clearly AI, getting views in the hundreds of millions. This person is not a creator in the YouTube definition, right? But now suddenly in this new workflow, there's hundreds and thousands of creators. And India especially, we have so many stories, right?
Of the world, yeah.
Yeah, but like anything in India, once something becomes successful, it gets invaded by a certain mentality.
I'm going to come to that. My closing question is going to cover that. So I'm just going to hold that thought. Dinesh, in India's digital public infrastructure, India's stack, UPI and stuff, has been truly innovational in a transformation of the Indian financial system, influencing global economies. in this slide, how do you evaluate true innovation when it comes to AI and development in the country? I mean, I'm obviously we're talking more India. So is building AI on top of generally, building an AI infrastructure is very expensive. I'm not a techie, but I kind of get what it is. And generally people build on top of existing platforms. So when you're looking at innovation in AI, is it should it change? Should it prioritize a make in India, make the whole thing here, or is the building on top of the existing infrastructure the way to go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's first define innovation. Let's talk about innovation being some sort of scientific discovery that advances any given field, right? Fairly broad definition. The scientific discoveries sometimes are happening in the private sector and corporations, but a lot of times they're happening within labs that you've never heard of inside universities or at government organizations, maybe less so in India. We would have to have the infrastructure to support cultivating those types of innovations and bringing them either to the public sector or to the private sector to commercialize them in order to really have the level of innovation to build a full stack around AI here in India. This is why we see a lot of the AI innovations that have happened over the last decade happen out of leading universities, for example, in the United States. So the large foundational models that exist, and if you look at the backbone of OpenAI or Anthropic or go down the list, these horizontal models, these sort of foundational models, took quite some time to develop on longitudinal AI improvements built on excessive training data, which they may or may not have had the right to use. That's another question that I'd love to talk about, but might be out of scope for the panel. Long story short is India, in theory, could catch up, but there's a huge educational infrastructure stack that would have to be built in order to do that. I like the word opportunistic that you used earlier. It's very possible that India could be much more opportunistic about it. It doesn't mean they couldn't pursue foundational models to compete at a global scale with what we're seeing coming out of the West, largely, to be very frank, coming out of the United States, because I think Europe is far behind on this front. Europe's far ahead in regulation, far behind on innovation. So India could certainly innovate. In fact, a lot of the people innovating are NRIs that are from India, many of whom were trained here. So I think we have an opportunity to exploit or take advantage in the most positive and favorable way of that talent to innovate on the infrastructure stack, but we need an educational paradigm that allows for cultivating those technologies. Being opportunistic, I would say it's more important that we cultivate middleware and applications on the use of the existing foundational models to show commercial opportunities to inspire creation, value creation. Ultimately, when we were creating value and we're delivering it to the populace, and then eventually investors and stakeholders in those businesses, if they're private sector, are harvesting value, that creates real opportunity, tangible opportunity to mentor and inspire the next generation of leaders to create the foundational technologies and concurrently have built an educational infrastructure stack that allows for people to innovate here with real scientific discoveries rather than leveraging everything from the West.
That's a good transition to my next question to Nikhil, apparently who is also teaches tech and media. So Nikhil, there's a Forbes article, and hopefully says 44% of organizations anticipate an AI-induced layoff in 2024. Yet 96% of hiring companies see AI skills as a valuable asset for candidates. Now, our topic today is collaboration ethics and the future of art and AI. So what is the future of work in the arts? What new roles and skills do we expect? I was reading this in the Times of India, Economic Times this week. They had this article and they had these descriptions of the new jobs. So I was looking for a new job, so I looked at it, and I'm just kidding. So digital human designer, AI art curator, maybe I can get a job, synthetic media specialist, and generative music composer. These are the new roles that are out there. So what do you think of the future of work? And what skills do we need to do?
So, I think whenever a new technology comes up, right, there's typically a lot of hype around that technology. For instance, I was recently in a conference and I met a big global law firm, which has hired, a specific trainer who will teach prompting, AI prompting to their lawyers. They have, roughly around 2,500 lawyers across the globe. They're teaching prompting to the lawyers. So I was joking to this gentleman that, do you remember how MS-DOS looked like? Right? And yeah, how MS-DOS looked like, or how terminal on Mac looked like, where you have to give a command to move a file from one point to the other. Till the time Windows 95 and came and replaced the UI of an operating system that we all know right now. So I said, listen, it's cool that you teach them, but I don't think, probably 5% is going to learn it. Probably 5% will actually innovate on it when we'll do prompting. But you're actually not spending your time in the right effort. I mean, it's okay for you to identify those 5% and teach them this prompting. Otherwise, you're not using your time and effort in the right possible manner, in the most efficient manner. So I would say that, look, many of these skills, many of the AI tools that we see today, right, will be used by all of us if we want to be relevant in the future's market, right? And I usually tell my lawyer friends that, look, AI is not going to replace lawyers. AI is not going to replace artists. But AI is going to replace those people who do not know how to use AI. That's what's going to happen. So to answer your question on future of work, I think most of the jobs that we see around, there will be disruption. But if you innovate with time, right, then you'll be safe. Your job will be safe. You'll just find new tools to produce art, just like the way Prateek was explaining some time back.
Prateek, do you want to carry this one? Or what skills do you think, how do we upskill?
I think, here's how I think about it. I think if you got like something very ambitious that you've been meaning to do, this accelerates it just for all of humanity by I don't know how much. It's like, it's a before after thing. It's not gradual anymore. So for example, I'll give you the example of the industry I work in outside of being an artist. I also lead development as a studio called Bang Bang, where we're trying to do long form content for platforms like Netflix, and we're trying to do feature films. And my sort of frustration with trying to, for the last 10 years, trying to pitch new kinds of projects in Mumbai was what drove me to say that I need to find a new way to do this. So let's say I'm trying to pitch the next big sci-fi Indian film or the next big fantasy Indian film. 10 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to even get the second meeting, because they'd be like, yeah, sure, you have a new idea, but we can't see anything. What are you talking about, right? As soon as these tools became proficient enough, now you can go to a producer saying that, look, here's 100 images from what this film you're putting your money in looks like. So you're able to...
Like a storyboard.
But I'm saying not a storyboard, like what it'll actually look like, because it's photorealistic, it's high quality, it's very different, and it's quicker, and one writer or one artist can do it without having to spend 2 years and like 50 lakh rupees doing it, right? So as an individual with an ambitious idea, I can use AI in any form to prototype and accelerate the more sort of complex things. And skilling, I think, I feel like many things are changing at the same time, so I'm hesitant to predict, but I feel like being a generalist is back in vogue, because if you have a broad understanding of many things and how different disciplines kind of interlock and can benefit from that, then you can really accelerate what you're doing. I feel like the skill set to build right now is use these tools as much as you possibly can in every aspect of your life, because they will be in every aspect of your life in like 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, I don't know. Use them. Yeah.
The same article said balance artistic vision with AI fluency, generative AI capabilities, and fusion skills, intelligent interrogation, judgment interrogation, and reciprocal apprenticing. I don't know what that means, but that's what they told me I need to learn. But anyway, moving on to, I know we're going to take some audience questions. How we time? 10 minutes? Yep. So I'm just going to go to the last question, then we'll throw it open to the audience. The potential and the challenge of AI in the creative field is great. It's impacting everything. We've gone through that. The ethical and innovative landscape will ultimately rely on the collaborative efforts of artists, technologists, and policymakers. So as we look towards a future shaped by AI, if you can suggest one transformative action, just one, that would bridge the gap between AI's potential and the value central to the arts. Really, because I've got a brief all this question. Of course, I would quick answer.
Like the one thing that would be transformational would be a fundamental change in the creative process. So, when is any artistic work, performing arts, visual arts, if there's a creative process, it's sort of in the mind scope of the individual or the world, and that there's some form of manifestation how it expresses itself. But how we deconstruct that process and how we document it doesn't really exist today. If we had tools that allow that process to happen as a natural, organic data exhaust for the creative process, so we're not putting the burden on the individual, that would be transformative. And let me explain why. So if you understood how an artist put together using, for example, the AI tools, a piece of work, if you could document everything that was happening, you now have the origin points to be able to track the provenance of that piece of art. Okay? If you don't have that, there's no way you could assign derivative work for what's being produced and account for the monetization and the allocation of value from where the source and whether you need commission, etc. So all creative processing need essentially augmentation or assistance tool and to help the creator unleash his or her or their creativity, but then augment it with a data layer of what was involved in that process. And I would simplify the analogy to simply this. If you're in a meeting and you have a conversation, you want to have a dialogue. But simple AI tools today will take notes from the meeting. I use them for my Zoom meetings, but then I also get an executive summary of everything that happened. It was a tool that augmented everything that I have a repository for later to access and take action on. The same thing would exist in the creative process. That would be absolutely transformative and allow us to move the industry forward with respect to AI. Wonderful. Thank you. I think I've covered this before. I would say that looking and rethinking the intellectual property rights will be the way in which this could be a transformative, and that's I'm speaking from the hat of somebody who's a policymaker. Also, this also involves rethinking some of the socioeconomic realities and the system that we do in the world. It's going to be a long process. It's going to be a long-term process, but there's going to be some struggle. There's going to be some pain for folks who are sitting on, this side and that side, right? But it will be good. I think this is eventually the media of so transformative that we have to get started with introducing. Okay, so I think it's a very new way of thinking about making something using these tools from, let's say, other paradigms. This needs to be a thing in schools, in primary schools. You need to the first step to tell the kid now that your interface and interaction with thinking, knowledge, learning, making art, making anything is fundamentally changing versus them having to figure it out by the time they get frustrated with school in the 10th standard and they're like, I'm going to do this other thing. It's such a different approach. It's still a lot of hard work. It's just a different kind of hard work that every day this is not getting yelling rather than getting into school. This is a day lost. Because let's say if you're in the 3rd standard right now, by the time you're of employable age, the more it is so dramatically different in how it works is that there is a serious disadvantage in this. And in terms of, let's say, we are famously not a country that supports in most families. Being an artist is not being an engineer is, right? But this blows it wide open so much that now we can change our engagement with arts, with creativity, with being a practitioner of a creative skill and make it more visible. So I think it's not just the kids, parents, especially at not in the top 5 metros, right? Everywhere need to understand that this is changing. You will also, if you look at the larger trends of automation and economic prosperity, being a creative person is going to almost become one of the default professions, right? Because for some person, every time
Creative person, there was another stat I was reading somewhere, this World Bank or something. Creativity is the number one skill people are looking for when you go across industries. Right. So it's not really applicable to, because when you do cross senior, so we're talking about collaboration and multi-industry, but we're running short of time.
Okay, so there's something that it's kind of buzzwordy, so I think we're moving from an industrial or an information economy to an imagination economy, where you can basically literally kind of create what you imagine or almost where often we get it right. You still have to imagine it. You have to understand where that will play out, who's going to care about it. So it's a very different way of engaging with all kinds of words.
Creative thinking, essentially. It's happening at schools now. Yeah, they are native. My daughter wants to do our work on ChatGPT. But let me just check. Throw this open to audience questions. Yes. Hello. We met last night. Yes.
Hi, my name is Asad, and I've been working as a designer and artist. And recently, I started working on an animation film for which this whole, the system of AI opened up for me. It's a historical film, so it has to draw about inspiration from 19th century Iran, 19th century, like that. And I was amazed to see how much resource is available and how I can. So my question to you is, in your recent work, how have you seen AI change exactly the way you work? Like, can you give an example from your real work scenario?
So it's not permeated to the level of actual production. So you're not seeing something on Netflix that is like a fully AI workflow thing yet. But I think that is maybe 2 years away. But online, so a lot of my sort of still work or image work is all AI, right? It's not AI plus Photoshop, it's not AI plus illustration, it's me, it's storytelling, but primary tools are like AI image tools. That's where we're getting to with, let's say, video, specifically in your case. So can you make an animation film that is like that you can release in theaters and is par with the average high quality animation film today? No, not yet, but it's getting there. That said, but you can do a lot more before the actual production. That was maybe not possible with the same kind of time and resource. So for example, if you're an animation film, you need distributors, partners, investors. You can make them see your vision much earlier in the process and almost as an individual. So let me put it this way, your creative output and your creative vision gets like amplified and supercharged in a way that wasn't possible, which helps you get funding for your projects, other collaborators much earlier in the process. So I think that's the right way to use it right now. You can just supercharge your own workflow. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question. We can't tell Minal not to ask a question. So, Zoya, don't look at me now.
I'll make it really quick. So, you've talked a lot about the possibilities of AI, the beneficial impact, what it's done for your industries. I mean, it's incredible. I imagine this jump in 10 years. I'm just, Dinesh, I'm thinking about, as someone who co-founded Tinder, I'm just saying, if you had to do it today, it would probably be a very different company, and these tools would have been very different. I mean, it's great what it can do, but what are some of the risks? What is it that and maybe this is, I think this is for each of you. What are the risks we're looking at 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? What is that kind of sci-fi nightmare, if you will, that we need to?
That would be a great closing question. I had something similar. So why don't you go ahead? Because Zoya is giving me the, AI looks.
So thanks, Manal. That's a great question. A few things. There's the obvious risks that are evangelized in the media or in Hollywood or in Bollywood. I'll give you the obvious example is an AI becomes sentient. It becomes self-aware. And we can define sentient, but for the purpose of this discussion, it becomes self-aware with an understanding or intent that humanity poses a threat to the world or the system by which is defined as a boundary condition for the AI. Those are like the obvious things, but I think there are, in the near term, much more real concerns or threats. And let me give you an example outside of the art industry. I just flew from Boston to here, where I'm on the Harvard Global Advisory Board. We did a case study while we were there on a company called Replica.ai. And it's about bridging human companionship using bots, because people have someone to talk to, almost a relationship with a bot. And they become very dependent on it. They become dependent on their AI companion as a source of therapy, a relationship, a friend. And you can imagine where this could go, especially for someone young, where the slope of their cognitive development is a vertical line because they're a teenager or they're in their early 20s. They're still developing, and they develop an attachment. Replica.ai is essentially taking advantage of that and beginning to monetize their business, right? And they're saying, well, should we charge for that? Well, maybe we want to change our business model, and they pull the feed for companionship and focus more on a therapy business. But suddenly all these people are left without their digital companion. And it sounds ridiculous, but these individuals feel a loss or loneliness, and it could lead to harm, self-harm by these people because they lost a companion that they actually became dependent on. My point of using this esoteric example is to suggest there are so many blind spots in our world in the use of AI that we're just not aware of. And we're finding them or discovering them as we begin deploying the technology and seeing how we made mistakes. So I think what we need to do is, as humanity, give ourselves a little room to make mistakes, to acknowledge when we've done so, to ask for a little forgiveness. But also when we put out new technologies into beta, generally in the public as a consumer technology or for other enterprises, to educate our users to understand what are the limitations and what are the concerns that we know of, and begin documenting and researching what are the things we don't know. So we can come up with a world where we say, I don't know, and then build on I don't know, because that's a fundamental source of knowledge.
Wonderful. I just saw a Swiss documentary film about this. The people building relationships and paying for it. And one person actually took permission from his partner to actually have a relationship with a bot. But Sean?
Yeah, so I would say that my biggest fear at this point of time is because we are not, largely LLMs are very English-based or global language-based. It's not trained enough on Indian languages. We find ChatGPT fascinating because it can predict the next word, right? What we need to understand is that India as a country, we've got around 22, scheduled languages and close to around 200 languages in India. And these are ChatGPT equivalents, right? And we have contracts with each other. We have a social contracts with each other, which is called languages, which has been developed over thousands and thousands of years, right? So unless we train the new technology on the existing languages, there is actually a probability that the language actually may become dead in some time by a, and if a language dies, it's actually years of human evolution, human thoughts, and human neuron connections, which cannot ever be replaced by technology. So I think that's the fear that I have. Unless we train these models in Indic languages, we will lose out of a whole lot of value and a different kind of thinking and a kind of a different brain and neuron connection, which is definitely not good for our country.
I think my singular biggest fear is an extension of what I said earlier. I feel like we already live in this content excess kind of thing where everyone's screen times have gone embarrassingly up, especially during COVID. And all of the, not going to name specifics, but all of the social media or content platforms have become very, very good at understanding what exactly you need, right? Now you marry that with the fact that they can start generating content on the fly based on that. It's like, sure, it's entertainment, but I don't know who, and I'm not generally a big fan of over-regulation, but I don't know what the end point of that is. What if my content feed becomes 5x more addictive and I just never want to stop? I think there is something lost when your lives are dominant. I mean, it sounds really, really like I'm an online creator, but to say that is kind of ironic, but I don't know how much more of that is healthy. And I don't know if we have currently thought through when the arms race scale of content production that already exists today is married to the zero cost, infinite content production of AI paradigms. When you marry the two, what happens? I don't know if as a culture we're ready for it or have any ways to engage with it, right? And as creators, the only thing you can do is, we should be intentional, but the profit motive will triumph everything else.
This panel, as Zoya had sent me the brief, was an extension of the panel they had last year, the first edition. So I'm intrigued to see the panel in the third edition and what our answers are going to be and how adoption, the risks and the rewards of AI and the arts. I mean, obviously, AI is here to stay. It's going to amplify what we're all doing. We at Avid, we do a lot of work in this space, including Prateek has been part of our G20 culture trackers that we've tried to lobby the government with to bring some legitimacy and help us navigate this path. Thank you to this panel. I mean, as I said, I was nervous looking at their bios and felt a little inadequate, to be honest. But it was a fascinating conversation. Thank you to the audience for being here in such large numbers. Thank you, Minal. Thank you, Zoya, for having me the second time. And have a wonderful rest of the evening.